On today's session, it's my pleasure to introduce you to your host for today, and his name is Miguel Morales. He's the Director of Business Development here at Cumulocity with a long tenure in the AIoT space, or what was formerly known as IoT. So without any further ado, Miguel, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce today's panelists and get this party started.
Absolutely. Good news is we got Boris as well. So guys, it's a great pleasure for me to be here today talking to you guys about cyber resilience. We have assembled an amazing group of panelists here. So I'll have them introduce themselves, but representing ABB Robotics, Microsoft manufacturing industry team, and of course the Cumulocity product. Why don't we just have them say hi real quick and we'll dive into the agenda and get moving. So Boris.
Yeah, great to meet you. So I'm responsible at ABB Robotics for the portfolio as well as operations of our digital solutions. And that is pretty much anything related to standalone software, simulation software, but also cloud software and IoT solutions. So quite a long-standing partner already for, I think, 2 years with Cumulocity, starting this journey. So very happy to be here and discuss this topic more in detail.
Awesome. And Janelle?
Yeah, hi, I'm Indranil Sarkar. I'm the Global CTO for Manufacturing and Mobility at Microsoft. So great to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Nicolas Neuerburg. I'm working closely together with Miguel at Cumulocity, leading the product team here, and also looking very much forward to this webinar.
Awesome. So it's a real superhero team that we got here. The agenda is as follows. We talk about the blueprint for cyber resilience, the blueprint for regulatory compliance. I just looked up the word resilience. What does it mean? The capacity to withstand or to recover quickly from difficulties. Because this is, in the modern world of security, it's really a risk play. You have to assume that something is going to happen. You have to assume that you are going to be required to update your devices in the field. And not only should you assume it, it has become regulated. So this is a story that we could tell probably 15 different ways, but we're going to start with a real world example where ABB Robotics has a vision of the future of robotics, and yet they have to overcome a compliance and regulatory hurdle to unlock that vision. So Boris is going to start off by talking about that vision and the commercial blueprint they use for success. They partnered with Cumulocity and Microsoft to implement the solution, and then we'll bring it all together back at the end, leave time for Q&A for all of the amazing folks that are joining. So I'll jump in and admit that the blueprint is not like a secret business process that ABB Robotics uses. It was something that I developed by interviewing and listening to Boris's story, right, of what I think they're doing really well. I've outlined here. We're going to start with the first three, where you map out the vision and the strategy. He'll talk about what that looks like. Did a great job specifying the challenges that you'll face when you start to tackle a project of this scope, whether it's the scope of regulatory compliance or something as large as the future of robotics. He teamed up to go farther faster. So he used the Azure tool set to implement zero trust and have that cyber resilience and agility. He teamed up with Cumulocity with a lot of built-in, out-of-the-box capability, and we'll jump into that. So Andranil and Nico asked that go off camera for me, and Boris, let's talk about a little bit about ABB and how you guys have gotten to where you are.
Absolutely. So maybe let me introduce a little bit ABB Robotics first. So what do? We provide products to our customers, so essentially like robots, but like robot controllers as well, in a quite broad portfolio, and that kind of in a global setting. So we have like large footprints in pretty much all countries which have manufacturing, which is of course US, Europe, but also China, which of course has its own specific challenge just to be able to provide the solutions in a harmonious way, like globally in these different markets. Beyond just like the products, we do more. I mean, we call like so-called functional modules and application cells. That means we take our products and we build, for example, welding solutions out of that. We build like paint lines out of that. We build certain like welding packages out of that. So really, really broad offering. And that from a connectivity perspective is interesting because we do not only, or we cannot afford to only look at the products and monitoring of specific products, but we need to think about, hey, if that integrates in solutions, how can we help our customers to find the right KPIs, to follow pretty much all the standards, to not only from a product perspective, but from a complete holistic systems approach. So how do we do that? So we are splitting between, we distinguish between device and device cloud and simulation cloud. And why do we do that? Because if you think about a life cycle of a customer, how do they bring automation or robotics to life and into production? The first thing they always do is to simulate. They simulate how the cycle time is going to be. They simulate their process. They want to understand in detail if it's going to work, how much it's going to cost, and they want to understand that whatever they have done in the virtual world, they can use later in the physical world. And for that, we spin up this simulation cloud where we have, where we create synthetic data for vision systems, where we spin up GPU clusters for high fidelity simulation, where we store like all the project information in Git. We have like a fully version controlled system. But that is only like one part of the coin. The second part of the coin is, of course, bringing it to life, to reality. So just assume our customer has done everything. They have created the virtual system, their station. They did run a virtual acceptance test with their end user and end customer. Then they build everything. They bring it to the shop floor at the customer side. And then, of course, reality hits. So our customers are now interested in understanding, okay, how does that compare? So what I've simulated, what is now happening in reality. And especially if we talk vision, for example, they want to be able to retrain their vision AI with a mix of synthetic data and a mix of real data to improve the KPIs of that as much as possible. And that means for us, from a connectivity perspective and IoT perspective, it's not just like one product and one element which we need to connect and we need to life cycle. It's different ones. It's our controllers, our robots, it's our vision systems, it's our kind of on-prem inference engines. Everything needs to be connected. Everything need to kind of run from a cloud perspective for full version control, and everything sends data to some extent. And that's kind of the device cloud where we worked, of course, very closely with Cumulocity and with Microsoft.
So what I found interesting when we spoke about this was, I guess I get that you're simulating and then you go into the real world, but when you go into the real world, first of all, you need more than just actuation of the robots. You need kind of a real-time control loop with additional sensor inputs. So that's how you end up with the need for multiple devices at the edge, right? And the second part that I found fascinating was that you have almost like a ML ops, like a edge AI models that you trained initially, but they need to be sort of tuned in the real world, right? So do you close that loop all the way back through the simulation cloud, or do you keep that in the device cloud? How does that work?
So we mostly, when the systems are live, we mostly keep it in the device cloud. But of course, the simulation cloud still plays a role if new products are introduced, because industrial environments are never static. Right? Our customers are changing things, they are reprogramming, they introduce like new product. Let's take in logistics for an example. Logistics it's all changing continuously. I mean, today I'm picking T-shirts, tomorrow I might pick jeans, right? But that means that you want to kind of test that in the simulation first again before you deploy it into the real world, and that's where Simulation Cloud plays a role. If it comes to the testing, yes, it's kind of an MLOps pipeline to deploy all the models, but at the same time, of course, we want to have the connectivity to track the KPIs. I mean, we need to understand the performance, because that's what we commit to our customers. We commit certain performance level of pick rates, for example. And if we are not able to monitor that and to react if something goes wrong or kind of deteriorates in terms of performance, we need to act.
Okay, that's really interesting too, because then what you're saying is, yes, on one hand, ABB is an industrial automation vendor, sells robots and hardware, but you're suggesting that from a digital services standpoint, you're monetizing your ability to achieve KPIs, the outcomes themselves, right?
I wouldn't say that we're that advanced to monetize directly the KPIs. It's more that what is expected from the system when we sell it. But we normally do have certain SLAs around our systems as well to keep supporting our customers. So yes, but they are not kind of that we are, unfortunately, we're not paid per pick yet. Something, I mean, we're exploring it, right? I mean, everybody explores that, but normally it's kind of, hey, you have this automation system and certain software SLAs which come with it.
And what role would you say security plays in convincing these customers to share that data? Because this is really sort of sensitive operational data that you're working with, right?
Yeah, I think it comes in because, I mean, it's a trust play in the end, right? I mean, our customers trust us that if we start connecting those systems, their data is, for example, not mixed with data of other customers, or they don't see it, right? Our customers trust us that we have all the necessary precautions for unauthorized access or any other kind of attacks on the infrastructure. I mean, that's something contractually we commit to, but at the same time, our customers trust us that we protect their data in a proper way.
Yeah, and it's been an evolution that I've seen, from even like 10 or 15 years ago, where systems were mostly unconnected, disconnected, to it seems to be like customers are starting to appreciate the value of the equipment manufacturer being able to monitor and offer a higher degree of service or a higher SLA commit as a result. Have you found that to be true, and do you see the trend continuing?
Yeah, I think we have two trends. I mean, we have one trend where, definitely our customers which do not have the necessary kind of capability on premise, and they see, hey, it's much more efficient to work with a partner who can kind of remotely connect into those assets and fix problems faster. So we see this. But at the same time, especially around like the AI systems, very often it doesn't work without anymore, right? Because you need cloud for continuous training. You cannot run completely disconnected to automate certain processes. So it's two trends which we see, which drive this architecture.
Nice. So on one hand, it's a greater willingness, but on the other, it's sort of the necessary elements. I like how you summarize the key challenges to overcome in your design here, and that it starts with security. But I guess give us a sense of some of the diversity that you're working with here.
Yeah. So security is, of course, it's the key element. I mean, without security, without this foundation, our customers don't trust us, and we don't have a workable solution. And this comes as well with the scalability of the platform. So we need to be able to operate, as I said in the beginning, in all the countries worldwide. We need to operate in China, we need to operate in Europe, we need to operate in US. All of them have a little bit different data privacy laws and standard and different regulatory compliance, which makes life a little bit harder for us.
Makes sense.
We require a high degree of flexibility, and the complexity is quite high. I mean, you can imagine if we do not only integrate the IoT devices, but we need to integrate with metering system in the back end for business purposes. We need to integrate with the simulation cloud for the projects, etc. that requires a high degree of flexibility on our side on the architecture as well. The third element, data and insights, is of course, I mean, we need to enable ourselves, right? We need to enable ourselves that our operations team are continuously being able to monitor and to provide the services to our customers. And we need to do that for a wide variety of customers. Meaning we work with very small customers, but we work with very large ones as well. Giving you an example, I mean, Amazon is one of our largest customers, right? And they have, of course, very different requirements from a, let's say, workflow, data security, etc. process compared to like a small SME. And that's something we need to kind of juggle as well.
Awesome. In this slide, where we start talking about teaming up to go farther faster, is kind of a 200 level view of the responsibilities inside. Can you talk a little bit about this part?
Yeah, sure.
Are you still with us? That's okay.
Yeah, I'm still with you. I think my camera just crashed. I tried to get it to work, but I hope you can hear me well, at least.
We can hear you well. Please continue.
Okay, that's perfect. Yeah, I think that, so. What we did, right, to make it happen, and I think the first design criteria which we have from our IS system is don't build yourself when you can acquire it, when you can acquire a gold standard on the market. So that's kind of the principle we follow. And from that principle, first thing what we did is we screened the market, and this is how we got actually in contact with Cumulocity. We said, hey, there's already a great device platform out there which helps us to achieve a lot of the heavy lifting and the plumbing and securing of some of the data. So we don't need to build it ourselves. So we can really focus on what we can do best, and that for us is the expertise of how do you simulate, how do you run those AI inferences, how do you monitor? I mean, how do you build the best kind of dashboards, so to say, for your customers? And that's really what we wanted to focus on, and this is why we partnered up here. And we use different elements from Cumulocity here. So on premise, since we have a wide variety of different devices, I mean, we work with Thin Edge, which is a nice edge software to connect. And I think, I mean, you're gonna talk a bit more about that later as well, if I've seen correctly. But also we have some devices where we kind of embed the agents directly and connect to the platform because they have just very limited compute. And I mean, Omnicore is our robot controller, has a real-time operating system. It's very specific, right? So something where we need to embed ourselves. But at the same time, we needed to extend the Cumulocity platform as well with specific capabilities for us. And that's especially around integration with our business systems. That is everything related to shared storage and archiving of IoT as well as synthetic data. This is for kind of automation of firmware services under the connectivity software. And with that, we found the best combination of this buy and build, which really helped us to speed up time to market and helps us to secure this platform in the best possible way.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the description of the system. I find it fascinating, this connection between simulation, deployment into the real world. Do you foresee the need as capabilities evolve to add even more devices at the edge? Is it a question of like, you might need more sensors to do something that's unexpected today? How do you see that evolving?
No, I think what I see is that the complexity on the edge is increasing, or like more and more increasing, at least for us. And that comes, I mean, yes, there are more sensors, but it comes mostly driven from the requirement that robot system need to be more flexible, more adaptable. I mean, currently, I guess if anyone who follows a little bit the tech news, I mean, here's about like embodied AI, where it's pretty much like bring everything together into a big inference engine on the edge. But yeah, this increases complexity, but at the same time, of course, it increases requirements as well. I mean, how do you lifecycle those models efficiently? How do you bring real-world data back for training? Right? So there's a lot of like edge cloud complexity which comes into play to deliver those systems. And I mean, what we are really focusing on, because we need to make it digestible and simple for our partners, our system integrators, which use our technology and bring them to market. We need to make it easy and scalable for us, right? So really taking very complex technology and make it usable in the industrial space, and that's what we want to do and what we are focusing on.
Awesome. So you want the customers to not have to worry about those details and just focus on solving their problems.
Yes.
We have a question. We have 3 more minutes for this section, so I'll take it. Jeff Garcia. Howdy, Jeff. Good to see you, man. Do you find customers must overcome internal challenges around security and network access? This is necessary for your product, but do you find it drives any change in behavior on your customer side?
That's a great question and so true. And I think one of the big challenges which we found always is you need to find the right people at the customer side. And often kind of your direct contact person, especially on the shop floor, don't know the IT experts who can help you with proxies, firewalls, and what have you, networking in general, right, to get things connected. So that is a process, and I think was a lot of learning for us as well, which questions to ask when you start connecting the system to get more quickly and to guide your customer in a better way to get quicker to those experts who can help you to resolve. Funnily, very often it's not the problem to agree that you want to connect. Most of the time that is even okay, right? And contractually you can do a lot to secure it. It's really navigating then the complexities of the IS organizations.
That makes sense. Or you want to do it, but you got to figure out how, and that's probably different for each customer. Sometimes maybe even each site. Well, thank you so much, Boris. Appreciate that context. And with that context, we're going to move into the technical blueprint of the presentation. And I'm going to invite Nico to join us on stage to talk a little bit about that, the element that Boris referenced and to source on the device management and data security side. So I think from just a tactical standpoint, we're going to switch to screen sharing for a minute, if that's okay. And I've got my screen ready to go.
Great, I already can start. So actually, when we prepared this webinar, I asked Boris a couple of weeks ago, why is security so important to you? Because we were doing this webinar on cyber resilience, and actually Boris, his answer was, well, security is actually not that big of a thing for me. Of course, we need our customers to trust. I mean, that is what he explained very well before, but I'm really focused on creating customer value. And my first reaction was, shit, we are doing a webinar on cyber resilience with a guy who says, well, I don't really care about security, I care about delivering solutions. But my next thought, hey, actually that is great, because that really things like how valuable also Cumulocity and CynEdge are for ABB. Because if you look into all the analyst reports, most leaders who are leading the digital and IoT initiatives are their number one concern is security. That's not the case for ABB. So ABB is like really number one concerns, how can I add valuable solutions to my customers? And one reason for that, I believe, is also the CynEdge IO technology, which was mentioned before, together with Cumulocity, because this makes security much easier than it used to be. So what is CynEdge IO actually? It's, as Boris explained it, it's basically a piece of software. It's an IoT edge framework, which is designed to basically securely connect just anything from the OT world to the internet, to the IoT, to the cloud. And with anything, of course, we are speaking here about processors and machines. So typically you have gateways, industrial gateways, PLCs. You can also connect the control board, an industrial PC, a VM. You can run CynEdge also on your Docker container or in your Kubernetes cluster. So it's a piece of software that allows you to deploy it anywhere, and which helps you to acquire data and also to remotely operate systems very easily. So if you switch to the next slide, this is something which I wanted to talk a bit more about. Is SynEdge is, in my opinion, the only IoT edge framework is both open, secure, and efficient. And what does it mean? So open means that it's actually as much your framework as it is our, because it is fully Apache 2.0 open source, meaning that it's really an open source framework. Everybody can use it. And we as Cumulocity, we even invested our engineering resources to make it work with the Azure Cloud Platform. Internally, we'll speak about Microsoft a bit later. It also works with AWS and other IoT platforms. And it also is open in the sense that we don't deliver a firmware package for a specific hardware device, but it's really a software platform, and it is designed in a way that it adapts to, for example, different firmware update frameworks, software update frameworks. It has a workflow model, so it really is built into integrating with any kind of scenarios. Because one thing that we have learned, and that is also to the comment from Jeff Garcia in the chat, is that deployment of an IoT solution looks different at every customer. So you need a very flexible deployment strategy to kind of adapt also to the customer's security concerns, network policies, like do I need to deploy into a DMZ or wherever? And if you have a piece of software which can be deployed on an IoT gateway, which can communicate via cellular, which can be deployed in a network, on a machine, industrial PC, virtual machine, that is a big advantage. Then the next thing, and this is actually what we are talking a lot about today, is security. SynEdge is secure by design. So it's built in a programming language which some of you might have heard. It's Rust, which is taking a memory-safe approach. So a lot of the attack vectors actually by the design of SynEdge as a kind of very lightweight, modular, Rust-based implementation already go away. And then it also adds a lot of security features on top, like, for example, HSM support. So HSM are hardware secure modules. So if your device brings the capability to store the, to have a kind of secure key store, SynEdge can use it and make sure that the identity of a device never leaves the device. We will speak a bit about that in a minute. And it, of course, also helps you with remote access, over-the-air updates, etc. And then efficiency is the last one, which is very important, because most edge frameworks that you see today are very heavyweight frameworks with several hundred megabytes of RAM footprint. So SynEdge can be deployed. Actually, we recently deployed it on a machine which only had, I think, 8 megabyte of RAM. So it can also be stripped down. It's a modular design. And given its implementation in Rust, it's very lean. So it doesn't work on microcontrollers. That's where Boris mentioned that they also have some additional clients. But basically on any Linux-based machine, you can deploy SynEdge, and it also adapts to the different attributes of different Linux distributions. So very, very good in that way. And know that I have pitched SynEdge, I hope, sufficiently, because I think it's really a great piece of software, and everybody should try it who wants to not have all the pains when it comes to connecting assets, devices. Let's move over to security, which is what we are here today for.
Just 2 comments before we move on. One is, I think recently Microsoft has been celebrating the migration of the Windows, I want to say it's the BIOS, to Rust as a benefit to security, and it being secure, memory safe, to prevent certain attacks, as well as smaller, so faster to boot and so forth. So that kind of came to mind in terms of our use of Rust. And also, I wanted to clarify that though in this case we're talking about Linux devices and Linux enablement via ThinEdge, Cumulocity does frequently connect to microcontroller-based devices with an agent on the microcontroller. It's just not necessarily using this particular runtime, right?
Yep.
But yeah, so ThinEdge is cool. How is it used to manage security when we think about a regulatory framework?
Exactly, and I mean, this is also, I mean, the next question is, Miguel, we worked on that slide together. What's the security posture of a connected device? So what actually defines security for a device? And we became to like these 3 levels of security, which is first of all the identity. We spoke on how CyNEDGE can help with hardware secure modules to establish a secure identity so that you can be really sure saying that I'm speaking with the device and I'm not speaking to someone impersonating with the device. That's someone we covered. But then we still have the what we call build time and one-time security. So build time security is what is the software that you have running on your device? And especially for cyber resilience, for the Cyber Resilience Act, which we're going to go in a second, that is a very big thing. So which software is actually running on the device, and is that software secure? And the thing about cybersecurity is you only know as much as you know. So there is no perfectly secure system. So it's really about managing risks. So how can I minimize any security risks? And for the what we call build time security, so all the software on the devices, of course, you need to establish your processes to continuously monitor all the ingredients in your software and see, is anybody out there who identified a new vulnerability? And if that is the case, then you can manage this by doing, for example, a software update or firmware update, something that also a framework like CyNEDGE can help with. So we spoke about identity. I know which device I'm talking to. Nobody can impersonate it as the device. The software on the device is secure. So everything which is running in terms of software on the device is secure. But there's an additional dimension to consider, and this is the one-time security. So even if you have a secure software, typically you have quite a bit of configuration on devices, which you change as the device once. So even though you don't update the software, you might introduce a vulnerability by changing the configuration, giving the wrong people access, opening some ports, whatever. And that's the one-time security. And often also, if you discover a vulnerability, the quickest path is not actually to fix the build time security, so to fix the software, but basically to adapt the configuration so that this vulnerability cannot be exploited. And that's where this CyNEDGE, it's configuration management, where it's really important that you basically know exactly how your device is configured. You can actually audit configuration changes, and you can also quickly change the configuration in order to, for example, remediate a security policy. So I really like this model of think about your security posture of your device around the identity plus one-time and build-time security. And of course, that's not a static view. You need to, of course, look at it from the life cycle. So as soon as things change, new people might discover new vulnerabilities in software that you're also using, or people might change the configuration of the devices. You, of course, need to continuously monitor that your device stays secure. And if we, yeah.
Well, what I was going to say is, in terms of the build versus buy approach, I think this really gets to the heart of, why SaaS in this day and age, right? It's not just the ability to IoT device management is not just simply the ability to perform a remote update or to update the certificate or even to update the configuration. Like, those things are relatively easy to implement, but to do it at millions of unit scale in a way that generates logs that are then auditable and provisioned as proof to an EU government body that is regulating this, I think that really takes it up a notch when you add in the questions of scalability, auditability, and automated process to manage that compliance.
Yep, that's an excellent point. Like, managing 10 devices is a different ballgame than managing 100,000 devices, and you really need to think your processes through from the beginning.
So tell us a little bit about the regulation, the EU CRA regulation.
Yeah, so I mean, this is the reaction of our European lawmakers, the Cyber Resilience Act, where actually I think it comes from the realization that a lot of the unsecurity also at the operators stems ultimately from the manufacturers of equipment which plays it together with software on your shop floor. And I think a very common threat vector was always default passwords. So there's still default passwords. And in the past, the one who was responsible for security was purely the operator. And of course, the operator could ask the OEM, like, do security checklists and make sure you don't use default passwords, otherwise I don't purchase your equipment. And this has not changed with the Cyber Resilience Act. So the Cyber Resilience Act really directly goes to the producers of products with digital elements, is how it's called in the Cyber Resilience Act. So basically every product which has software on it, regardless of whether it's connected or not, and says you are responsible for the cyber security of your product. So if you deliver your product to your customer, in the standard default configuration, it must be secure. Otherwise, it's your problem and not, as well as the operator's problem, because they always have the security risk, of course. And I think this is this important mind shift change with the Cyber Resilience Act, like really holding the product manufacturers responsible for the end-to-end security of their product. And it's a new legislation in the EU, which will stepwise go into force fully by December 2027. And at the moment, we can see that a lot of our customers are actually preparing themselves for the Cyber Resilience Act. When I asked Boris about it, he mentioned for us it's mainly documentation and checklists. Thanks to our internal policies and CynEdge and Cumulocity, we are already green on most bars, but still is a lot of work we need to do also in terms of complying with documentation and reporting requirements from the CIA.
Yeah, along these lines, I mean, what first struck me is if there's a new exploitable vulnerability identified, you're supposed to report it within 24 hours to a European body, right? And this year, you have to start reporting by September 26th. Next year, in December, the penalties can go into effect, which are up to 2% of global revenue. So for enterprise companies doing major business or selling anything to Europe, that's a really significant business continuity risk. It's one of the reasons that we've partnered so closely with Microsoft to put together a joint framework for addressing CRA compliance. And we have offered a pre-integrated framework. We're publishing white papers. There's a couple that will be downloadable at the end of this webinar that I encourage you guys to go to download, and including one that was co-authored with the EY legal team in Germany, addressing the paperwork side of it too, right? That it, to your point, Nico, is not just a technical problem that you need to overcome, although there is certainly lots of our customers that need to do that, but that the legal and documentation compliance is a big element. But talk a little bit about this framework, and then I want to give Indranil a chance to talk about Azure's contribution.
Yeah, I mean, I think this framework or reference architecture, how we also sometimes call it, it shows a bit that it's actually, if you want to create a secure product, there are quite a few components that you need to consider. So starting with what you see on the right-hand side, the software development and build infrastructure, like really starting on how do I actually build my software, which later goes into the products. Starting with disclosure, like where and how do I actually disclose vulnerabilities? Have I thought about this processes of informing also my customers on discovered vulnerabilities? Then, of course, you have the device side where you need to make sure that your actual product is secure, but you also need to monitor the security constantly. And typically, customers want to integrate with their security event and monitoring tool. So I'm not going to go into this into a very detailed walkthrough of this architecture, but I think what it shows very well that you actually need to think about various aspects, also that various people within your organization, from the product teams to your security CISO officer, will be involved. And I think this is also a great segue to Indranil from Microsoft, because Microsoft is actually doing a lot. We have spoken a lot about this device security, device side security, but I think Indranil, you can also enrich this picture with the more holistic view on it.
Awesome. Yes. Indranil, please come on stage and let's talk a little bit about Microsoft and Azure. As he comes on stage, I will mention, when we say the technical blueprint, if you join this webinar for the technical blueprint of CRA regulatory framework, this is it. This is the slide you can take and share, compare your project against, and we'd love to help you with that. But Indranil, thank you for joining us. It's a real pleasure having worked with you and building this partnership together with Microsoft. What does the boardroom look like when it comes to OT security? What are you seeing, and what's Microsoft's stance on OT security?
I think the OT security is something that's foundational for most customers as we have these conversations with senior executives and other things. And it's on the top of the mind also from a CISO's perspective, not just the cybersecurity, but how do you essentially bring the element of the cloud connected, the cloud first approach many of these customers are now taking. And Boris was highlighting that you have to connect to the cloud at some point of time, to take advantage of a lot of the newer things. And I think that essentially opens up the conversation that, how do you create a seamless way of looking at just the OT security? And, the answer to the OT security is also a defense in depth. The idea is that there is no one single thing can solve the problem. It's all about, different regulations are asking for certain things. You need to also ensure that you have everything in particular place. And I think as Nico was explaining through the thin edge and the key aspects of what it requires. So they are all in a combinations of doing that. And I think, I wanted to go back to the point that Boris was also highlighting as part of the end customer scenarios, and the adaptability is a key to this whole aspect of it. The technology has come further along, and we as a platform provider have been thinking about this particular space for quite a long time, and have been gone through multiple iterations of the whole thing, starting with the Industry 4.0 when it actually came out almost a decade ago. And I think, what we have seen is that today's customers are all operating in a very hybrid, multi-cloud with a different kind of edge scenarios. And it's even in the same environment, you have different edge, and it's clearly, like as Boris was explaining about the various scenarios, how it actually works there. Which creates a complexity for both operations, IT, and data. So our, the adaptive cloud approach has always been enabled by, where we are moving towards is that having a governance and a control plane that can actually manage that, and it unifies different environments under a single platform, whether it is for operations, innovations, and insights, and how you basically run this as an example of it. Now, the foundation and the way how we start to think about it, that there are two very clearly distinct foundational planes that we operate, and one is what we call the data plane that ensures consistent data services, and analytics, making information actionable across all environment. And it's also about the personas. If you think about any environment, you have the OT personas, from operators to technicians to maintenance people, plant managers, and others. And then you have the IT personas who need to manage the entire environment, from an IT networking and everything as an example of it. And then there is also the data personals, who are working on the data side of the whole equation as an example of it. And the second aspect of a cloud like this is also about the management plane that provides a centralized governance, compliance, and other things. And so our vision of that whole, how we anchor these planes to an open standard, unified platform across the companies, the identity management. And that's what the overall adaptive cloud is, ensuring those kind of interoperability. So when you really look into, what comes to life in a manufacturing scenario, and this is one of those slides essentially highlights the different kinds of, on the left side, you see all the different kinds of industrial equipments that there also, which is on site, which could be cloud connected, distributed, depending on what the scenarios are. And as I mentioned, the standards are starting to play a role. Microsoft has moved more and more towards standards, open source based capabilities. And so you're talking about MQTT, REST based protocols, and OPC UA and other things that are starting to play a role. And the identification, and like Nico was talking about the thin edge, and Boris was talking about why thin edge was important. That thin edge is essentially an example of how in an environment you can adapt and create a much more secure edge to cloud capability as an example of it. And our goal is that how do we actually enable those scenarios faster, easier, without going through a significant amount of development, management, maintenance, and other aspects of it. Thin edge, it acts as a lightweight, flexible gateway for doing much of those things. And what I like the most about it is that from an ecosystem, partnerships, and everything else, Cumulocity has really adopted this cloud foundation, and working with our own engineering team in trying to identify and bring some of these things together as an example of it. And end of the day, what we talk about on the cloud side of it is essentially we are looking into the that one side you are operating on the edge itself, that we call it the Azure IoT operations on the edge. And on the other side, you're talking about a cloud connected with the Azure IoT hub that manages device identity, data, while the whole aspects of all of these things bridging together is a very critical aspect of operations, and what we call the digital operations as an example of it. Now, going back to the earlier point that I was mentioning about the OT security being more critical than ever, and at every layer of this adaptive cloud, we have addressed security, whether it is layered network approach, whether how you actually manage the Kubernetes, from a security perspective, from a deployment. But we're also looking into other aspects that are critical to any digital operations. For example, the firmware analysis. Now it's generally available. It's helping customers to identify the vulnerabilities, and exactly the way how Nico was explaining that CRA's requirements are so stringent, and the time that is available for most of the organizations to adapt to those standards are shortening as we get to the to the September of next year as an example of it. And I think that's where our security hardening and our joint partnership, because end of the day it's Cumulocity working with ABB and the customers to ensure that these are all working together jointly with our own engineering. And so that's the bigger opportunity of an ecosystem coming together and delivering a very specific kind of a problem solutions in a very adaptive way for the customer.
Thank you, Janelle. When I see something like this, what I appreciate about the adaptive cloud framework is that it offers sort of a design pattern and containerization and security pattern that allows you to leverage the Microsoft's leadership in security to monitor your workloads, whether they're in the cloud or they're at the edge. And Cumulocity as a hybrid platform benefits from that, because we host in Azure and we deploy locally onto servers at the edge. So to be able to containerize it and use a common framework for managing that security and governance on an enterprise IT side, while bridging to the real world devices on the OT side, it really gives us a broader access to the market as a SaaS provider, that if we follow the adaptive cloud framework and those customers are also following the adaptive cloud framework, we know that they're going to be able to better monitor and manage our deployments in these hybrid environments. And this firmware analysis tool, I think kudos to you guys and the digital operation.
Before you go to that, one point I wanted to add from an adaptive cloud perspective also, which I didn't touch upon, is that what's the future? Where do we see the future moving more and more towards? One is the data is the foundation. And so what you see is that as a complete stack, we are creating not just the edge, but also the data foundations using Microsoft Fabric and real-time intelligence and digital twin build up and all of those things as an example of it. And then the second aspect is that as we see the co-pilots and the agentic AI taking shape, and how do you now start to deploy them also on the edge? So it's also creating that beachhead for the future state scenarios and a North Star view where this needs to get to, as an example of it. And that's why this whole idea of the adaptive cloud as an example. But to your point, ultimately, we will also have to link into that the broader construct around the OT security. And I wanted to share this point before you jump into the the ISPOM and other aspects of the overall firmware analysis. So
Yeah,
please go ahead.
I think we're just starting to see in the industry the real benefits of a fabric-based AI approach, where you can sort of put all your data into one lake, and then abstract it into the most useful scenarios. So there's definitely going to be the operational data that Cumulocity feeds into Fabric, and there's also going to be security telemetry that we feed into Fabric, whether you're talking about maintaining security, achieving compliance, or applying governance. So the data plane that you're talking about is awesome. This tool is awesome. The firmware analysis, we have a demo with Cumulocity that's available on YouTube. It shows you how to use this firmware analysis tool to identify new vulnerabilities in your firmware. It provides SBOM and a report recommending how to harden the software. So just went GA. I think it's a really cool contribution. Again, we have pre-integrated these things with Cumulocity and Azure to make it very easy to achieve CRA compliance. And I want to bring it all back, calling Nico and Boris back to the stage to bring things back together and wrap it up with the last two elements of the commercial blueprint, which was expect surprises, lean on the team for help, and then define success as the integral of small wins. Boris, help me out here. What's something that surprised you as ABB, as you've gone through this journey with ABB Robotics system? And give me an example of some of the small wins you guys are, or even big wins that you guys are picking up along the way.
What surprised me? That's a very broad question.
I think I remember you mentioned the auditability was a pain in your side. Or
yeah, I mean, auditability for sure, right? I mean, why am I struggling to answer that? Because I mean, of course, every development project has its surprises, absolutely, right? And I think, I mean, auditability, documentation, right? I mean, all of those things which you feel are not visible, right, seem to be the most painful and the most important ones in the end. At least from a cybersecurity perspective, right? And I mean, I think Nicholas mentioned it, right? I mean, I don't care about security, and I wouldn't say that I don't care. It's just that I don't want to care.
Yeah.
This is why I mean, we have to partner up as well, right? And why we try to say how can we make our life as easy as possible to kind of get this like non-visible parts like audit logs, traceability, documentation. I think, I mean, data access and APIs now coming, of course, with a new EU Data Act, right? That we can make data available to customers easily. How do we do that without spending too much effort?
Yeah, and it's funny you say I don't want to care about security. I say that all the time with my team and with my customers. No one cares about security. What they want is compliance, right? Like if you can deliver compliance, and that's really our goal here in the partnership with Microsoft and that we're talking about with you is how do we make it easier using, the solution to deliver compliance with the minimal amount of hard work, because it really is.
Of course. I mean, of course, I want a secure solution. It's more that my customers will not pay me for it, right? My customers will when my customers will come to me if something is not secure, and then I have a problem. So, but it's not a value I'm able to sell.
Indeed, although I will make the argument that with the CRA, it forces a certain discipline for identifying, patching, distributing updates to devices that I think is actually going to change the industry, and it's going to make everybody more efficient. I think the ones that do it first, the ones that become compliant first, are going to be more competitive because they're just fundamentally going to have a more productive development cycle that can be deployed faster and with higher confidence. So they're going to build trust faster, but their software operations are going to be fundamentally more efficient. So there's an argument that although people won't necessarily pay you for security, they do pay you to be competitive. And this is going to force people to update their cycles and become ultimately more productive and secure. In case anybody's watching this and is wondering, man, I'd love the opportunity to get some thoughts on comparing the technical blueprint or even the commercial blueprint in my strategy with what I'm currently doing. We do have a readiness assessment that is published and available, also part of your downloadable kit. It's for only 10,000 American dollars. You get a discovery meeting, you get a gap analysis meeting, which is the heavy workshop, you get a report of findings, and 5 one-on-one stakeholder interviews inside your company. It is a fast, easy way to either get started or review your CRA initiative, and is certainly something that I recommend you guys consider. We are only 3 minutes left for Q&A. Let's see if we find any additional questions. We got Jeff Subandhu Das. Does the solution address data residency compliance needs, and how and when manufacturing units usually span across geos? Yes, but meaning, Nico, what would you say about data residency across geos?
I mean, it's a complex question. I think a complex question might have a complex answer. There are a lot of things you can do. You can leave, of course, your data locally, so you do not have to send all data. For example, what CNH offers is kind of a workflow engine. In the end, you have this MQTT broker as an inter-process communication. You can aggregate data. You can pre-process data before you send it into a central system. And then, of course, you also have the option to set up different deployments of a cloud platform in different regions. Also, this is something we see a lot. That we see that usually for Europe and China and US, that you want basically to have your data local. So these are things we do see quite frequently, especially for China. This is a big thing because China is very strict on not leaving any data leave their country.
Yeah, I think the Middle East as well, right? So we Cumulocity works together with Azure to deploy data resident solutions in the Middle East and globally as required by different regulatory regimes. Totally 100% possible, though it may not necessarily all be represented in the diagram that you download for CRA compliance. We can absolutely help you with that. We do deploy in China, which is difficult and something that we've solved multiple times. Guys, please submit any additional questions, send us emails. These rock stars that are on the panel today, thank you so much for joining us. There's some QR codes so you can find them on LinkedIn and follow them and their thought leadership. All of this stuff will be downloadable. Thank you for joining. Thank you to the panelists. And we look forward to seeing you out there in the field.